This video is part of Nickel J's journal on building a mountain cabin. In the last segment of this cabin building series, I covered this wall with tongue and groove and shiplap. I ended the segment wrapping this upper window. In this segment, I'm going to wrap these lower windows and this door over here. The basic idea is I'll put a inner piece in here and then a face piece like that. So I'll start by getting some measurements, and to do that I'll use just a flat board. That's 7 9/16. So I'm going to the middle of each section. So I'll go here, 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 and here, grab a measurement, and then I write them down. What I'll do is choose the widest one, 7 5/8, and just a little more. The thing I don't want to do is cut these too narrow and have a gap right here. That just wouldn't look good at all. What I'm doing is choosing the widest measurement. I'll cut all my boards to it, and some of them are going to come out a 1/16, maybe an 1/8 of an inch proud. That's all right. I want this trim up against the window snug, and I want the piece that comes out here to be against this snug. The widest leg of this inside window wrap for this window is up there. So I got to poking around to see if anything was loose, and sure enough, I can move that board in a little bit. So I'm going to snug it up. Now it's probably the same as the others now. That did it. Now the width for all of these legs are the same thing. They all measure just a little bit over 7 1/2. Not quite 7 9/16, but that's what I'll cut these at. I'll cut these at about 7 9/16, just so that they stand a little bit proud. For the lengths on the bottom and top pieces, I'm a little more careful on this bottom piece. The top one, I can just cut it so that it's got, an 1/8 of an inch of clearance, because I'll never be able to see a little void there. But this one, I'm going to run a little wide to form a shelf. Rather than going like this, it'll be like this. So this board needs to be a little bit wider than the top one. And the idea is to form a shelf here for setting your flower pots and coffee cups and such. Since I want a snug measurement on this bottom leg, I can use blocks to help me visualize it. "36 inches. Dead nuts right there. Okay, so I'm going to cut this 36 inches long, this one just a little bit shorter. I just want it to go in easy. I couldn't use this board up on my ceiling. This was a cull piece, and I labeled it. This edge was straight. I had it on my cutting bench, so I went ahead and cut one edge straight, so I had something to work with. And this end this edge is crooked, and I labeled it so I know what's going on. So I'll work off this straight edge here. I'll take out the pieces that could be unstable. That's wherever knots are. I won't use this. This is probably okay because the knot is surrounded by good wood. I like to cut my lengths first and then cut to widths on the table saw, simply because the boards are so much easier to handle on the table saw. I have the horizontal pieces cut to length. Notice the line formed by the top of this board and this window. It's narrower up here than it is over here. What I need is to dress this window properly is more like that. This is low. I'll shim this up to where it's the proper height for this reveal here. Once I have the two horizontal pieces in place, I'm ready to grab a measurement for the side pieces. This is what I gotta come to. Once the board's cut, I'll set it on top of the two horizontal pieces and just test the fit. So the length looks fine. Looks like it'll assemble okay. All right, move it along. I just noticed I've got a crack in this piece of rough stock. It looks like it'll still just work. Yeah, it's just wide enough. I cut the second leg and just set it in place. Both of these have a good reveal. That's this. The reveal is this vertical line formed by the vinyl and this board. It's all about 7/8 of an inch all the way up and down. The finished carpenter's job is to make everything look good, and the reveal is what a finished carpenter targets. For example, this reveal's bad. You know, I can see a lot more of this window frame here than I can here. So, and that's why I cut these legs off of this side rather than that side, because that one would be too long. I wouldn't be able to assemble it. So when I do assemble, I'll raise this, you know, that much. So I'm ready to rip these four pieces, the two uprights and the two horizontal pieces. I'll set up the table saw and do that. This bottom sill will be cut a little bit wider than the other three because it's going to form a shelf. And to get an idea of where I want to rip this, I'll just make a mark on it with a 3/4 inch board, and I'll actually cut it a little wider than that extra 3/4 of an inch. The shelf can extend out maybe a 1/2 inch. I wouldn't go any wider than about 1/2 inch, because it's like the leading edge of a stairway tread. You don't want too much hanging out here because it'll break off. You can see this width here is less than this width here. So what I need to do is get into my shim box. To get an idea how thick the shim needs to be, I can actually measure it. Let's see, this might help. Yeah, this is the height of this edge in the vinyl on the window. Slide it over here, and I can see that it's not quite a quarter of an inch lower. So let's try. That's about right. So this might be my shim here. Yeah, that puts me up just about like this. Got to press down. It's just about like this side. And I want to put something in the middle. Slide it that way until it gets snug. About right there. Some fine carpentry going on here. Then I'll go about there, and that'll go about there. Yeah, that reveal here looks better now. I measured and cut both of these legs on this side, the high side here. So these are both the same length. So my raising this shelf shouldn't have made this the wrong length. In theory, we'll see what happens here. Huh, got something on there. I just oiled these boards last night. They're still a little wet. And I got some more black stuff on there. I don't know what that was. I made a mess somehow. I think I'll leave it alone until it dries. I'll fuss with it. Yeah. Okay, just first glance, my reveal here is good. This 3/4 inch strip of vinyl is the same all the way up and down. And same here. It's not looking too bad. That board slipped out. I need to get up there and see if it's going to behave okay. I see something here I don't like. This board is wider than this board. How'd I do that? Same here. I'll be darned. What I did was just cut the end of this board off a little bit. And they're perfect now. What was going on was this was not tight against this. That board was cockeyed because I couldn't get it in. Wasn't tapping it in all the way. So now I've got what I want here. So that'll cover nicely. See how the trim is proud from the wall, wider than the wall. But look what happens when you put the trim on it. It looks fine, looks nice. Yeah, I'm good. Okay, so the mistake that I make the most often wrapping windows is cutting things too tight. I need to remember that and loosen up just a little bit when I cut the boards off. The only thing that matters is on these inside window wraps is this reveal, and that the boards come together true. And this is magnified considerably with a wider wall like this. This is a pretty unusual wall. Those are the only two things I need to worry about, because the length of these boards gets covered. If these boards were too short, I would just shim this up here, so there's no reason to get too carried away with cutting everything real close. I like to start throwing nails in the wrap from the bottom and work my way up. But before I do the seal, I like to check it to see if anything's going to move when a lot of weight's put on it, because there will be. This is just too convenient of a height not to set your gluteus maximus right there and catch the sun's rays. So I go around and I just check that if weight's out, and I see a spot. Look at that, right there. You see that? That's what I'm looking for. Because I can put nails in here, and the finished nails won't move this board. They're injected into the wood without much pressure. If I were driving nails, I probably would have opened that up and seen it. But fortunately, I caught it. So I'm gonna find a shim that'll go in here. Yeah, that'll do it. So that's a good catch there. Make sure that this stays tight when I shove on it. Ah, right there. Another one. So this window seal framing is probably twisted a little bit that way. So I've got to disassemble my work. I'm glad I haven't put any nails in it. Put a shim here and reassemble. There now, when somebody sits on this, it won't move things around. I had to take the assembly apart, back out, and put it back in probably 3 or 4 times until I got the shims right. But of course, I'll edit all that out of the video. It's a universal yet unspoken rule for YouTube videos to make everything look quick and easy, and to project yourself as an expert. I'm just using 1 3/4 inch nails for this window seal. These 15 gauge finish nails are pretty discreet, but I still like to give some thought to how they go in. Any, anything that can be seen, I like to make them, you know, clean and with some kind of order, so it looks like an expert did this. They'll never know, but if they see my nails in line, they may think so. That'll do. The black spots I've been finding on my boards are gnats that landed on the boards when they were still wet. Yeah. Look at that. What a mess. I'm going to have to resand these because they don't come out. Maybe I'll get away with scraping them off. Their bodies leave a black stain if I smear them. But it looks like if I scrape them up, I'm going to be all right. Always something to slow down a good man. Yeah, I think I'm going to get out of this one okay. The interior trim on this window went in first try. Honest. The reveal looks good here. Looks good up on top. Looks a little narrow right here. Oh, I think that when I nail this in place, it's going to be all right. Doesn't look like I get any separation here when I sit on it. Oh, here I do. I'll need to shim that up. Try this one. That's pretty good. Okay, I'm ready to choose some materials and put up some face frame, and that'll be boards that will go on there about like this. I'll be putting face frame, well, there's some up there on that upper window that I installed before I moved the scaffolding. That's the same idea. I'll be ripping some face frame for 2 windows and the door here. In my pile of scraps, well, not scraps, but odds and ends, I've got some leftover shiplap and tongue and groove from the wall and ceilings. And the advantage of this stuff is it's already got the oil on it. So I'll probably choose a trim that's as wide as I can go by ripping the grooves out of the shiplap. I'd like to stay with about 6 inches or so. So it looks like the face trim that I'll end up with will be about 5.5 inches wide after cutting down all this leftover homemade shiplap. It's good to use this stuff up, and I've got that pile of leftovers cleaned up off the floor over there. I chose this 1x8 for the vertical face trim on one of my windows because it has a slight cup in it this way. You can see a straight edge rock back and forth. And I'll explain why I chose this board in just a minute. I screwed a temporary stick underneath the bottom window sill. That gives me something to work off of. The stick gives me something to measure off of. So I want to go right here. It's 58 13/16. 58 13/16. Put a dot right there where I want it to cut. I want to split that dot. Then I measure over 5 inches and 1/16. My saw fence is 5 inches, my saw blade is 1/16. I use a thin kerf blade. I put my square so the long end is towards me so that I can better line up my saw fence with my straight edge. Make sure it feels good, like I'm sliding against the guide. Recall I measured the width of my wall from the window out, took the widest measurement and cut all of my inside wraps to that widest measurement. So down here you can see that it's pretty close to the same width, just a little bit proud, not much. Here it's quite a bit of difference. And there's a couple ways to approach this. One is I'd like to show you, this is a pretty flat block. So let's just put it here like it were a trim board. And notice there's not quite a 1/16 of gap in some places here. And that's because this board sits proud of the wall. And this inside corner is pushing my face trim out and giving me that little bit of gap right there. Okay, now this piece that I chose has a slight cup in it. This is going to be my face trim. Now if I turn the cup that way, watch what happens. Lined up here. I can make that just as tight as I want it, all the way up. And that's what I'll do when I put this board in place, once it's oiled and sanded and oiled. And I'll stitch it right here first. And you can see how I can close it up. And that's because it's got this little bit of cup here. And that's avoiding this corner on my inside trim. And there's other ways to deal with it. I can take my plane and just knock a little off this inside edge. Does the same thing. Notching the vertical face pieces for the bottom inside shelf. Okay, I've got a piece of wood picked out for each window and the door. I like to just set them in front of where they're going to go. So it's a quick visual to see that I've got everything that I need. I've got the boards for the face trim ripped to width, sanded and oiled up. They were drying last night. So this morning I'll be window dressing. I use the temporary stick here to get my width on this horizontal piece. That's where it goes. The varnish on these boards is still a little bit wet. When I had my temporary stick up here, I left myself some inconspicuous dots on the wall to show me where to put this bottom piece of trim. I'll put a nail out here, push it up in the middle, put a nail in there, push it up on the end, put a nail there. And I usually just tack the boards in place well enough to hold them and make sure everything fits okay. You know, if I have to pull a board out to file it or plane it or something to make it fit just right, I don't want to have a lot of nails to work through. And I can tack this one in place. I like to stitch it up along the front first and then fasten it to the wall. Push that over where I want it. There. Now that the upright pieces are in place, it's easy to get the length for this last horizontal piece. 46, and I cut this top piece a 1/2 inch long and let it hang over a 1/4 inch on both sides. Just my taste. And I'll just feel both ends until it's about the same. I want about a 1/4 inch overhang, about like that. This board's a little low, so I'm going to push it up when I put my nail in it. See if that'll stay there. Yeah. Well, there it is. A trimmed window. The face trim goes real fast. All the work's, on the inside wrap. So I've got a little touch up. I need to put some stain on this edge that I knocked down with the plane. I soften that up so that a person can put their hip up there and sit down if they like. It's a simple way to wrap windows. I think of it as traditional, put the wood there type carpentry. Not a lot of fussing around. And I'll turn my attention to the door and the other window now. I was just test fitting the door trim, and there's a problem. The wall comes out further than the door casing. If I stitch this up, I've got a gap over here, or if I tighten it up over here, I've got a strong 1/16 of an inch gap there. Got to think about what to do here. Of course, if it was painted job, you know, you just get out the caulk gun and, you know, fill the cracks and paint over it. You don't worry about it. But it takes a little more fussing around when you're working with natural wood. Another option is to remove some material from the outside, the inside of this board on the outside. Leave it full width here, but make it thinner here. And to do that, I'd probably want to use a dado blade on my table saw, and I don't know if I have one of those up here. I'm going to look around and I'll get back to you. Little touch up here. That fits. When I have hardware putting me where I don't want to be, I still respect the hardware. I'd rather this edge came all the way out to here, but I'm not going to make it because of the door hinges here. And I think it looks hokey to notch this out. I've seen that done, I've done it, and I just don't care for the look. So on the door, I'm gonna run the trim like this with that little stair step in here. And I'll do the same thing on the other side, whether I need to or not, just to be symmetric. So I'll put this up against the hinge. Gosh, that fits nice. And I think I'll just start right here so it'll stay there for me. And I'm gonna come in about 3/8 of an inch, slope that way just a little bit, let her rip. So on this side, I'm going to stay off this striker plate in the door jamb. And if I use about the same setback on this side, I'll be right about where I want to be. So I'll put it where I want here. So I'm just visualizing this step here. And I like it here and here. Up here it runs towards the door. So what I'll do is nail it off on the bottom so that I can go up on the step stool and bend this board over that way a little bit. I think a good place to start, right about there. Still good up into about here. And since I'm going to be bending it right there, I'm going to pop another nail in there to help hold it. Go up my step stool. I couldn't bend this board over with one hand and handle the nail gun with the other hand while up on my stool. So I'm going to try another approach. Of course, if there's two people, a lot of this stuff is... So I'm just pushing this board back that way. A little more. About right there. Looks like there may be one a little more tap. Now I can nail this board off. Yeah, that'll do it. And I'm going to find something else to do for a minute before I pull this wedge out. These finish nails do a pretty good job, but if this board is real stubborn, it could want to twist back and bend these finish nails and go back to the spot that it was in. So I'm going to just leave this here for a little while and let this guy get used to his new shape. There. I sighted down the wall and noticed that the header is not up against the wall, especially right here. Some 2.5-inch nails. I know that that trim header has a solid framing header like this one. So I've got anything I want to nail to there. That looks better. Just cost me a screw hole here is all. Every time I cut a board, I'm picking the side that I want to keep, or the part that I want to keep. So I look it over. No problems this way. No problems this way. Sometimes it makes a difference. Sometimes the board just fits better because of its cup or warp. With this board, I've got one knot on this side and 1, 2 that I'm already into, and I'd be into a third. So I think I'm gonna just cut this side, and this will be my inside. I think that's a pretty tight knot, and it'll stay there. So I'm going to cut this side of the board. That's the process I go through every time I cut a board. This is the finished side of the board, and I think I see where my saw drifted that way on the inside of this board. Do a little custom carpentry. That may have helped. Looks pretty good. That's good. And I can nail anywhere I want here. I don't know if you remember. Well, I'll show you. I've got solid framing all the way through there. So I'm just going to pick spots where the board's a little dark anyway. Get it lined up. That's about all I'm going to do, just to hold this in place so that I can get my header on. So I put my marks so that all of the lead of my pencil is below the top of this board. And then when I cut the board, I remove the lead. I know I'm being fussy, but you know, why not? I think it makes it funner to try to be exact. So there's my dot. I can see my little nick right there. I'll probably get my varnish rag and try to make that shiny spot go away where I opened up that fresh wood. Well, this board is just long enough. Turn it over and put my pencil mark on it. I cut it about right there. Now, I'm not going to hit this knot. I'm not going to put a nail in right there because I have this vision of that knot just shattering. So I'll go to each side of the knot. That's my style. That's where I threw the board up there. If I pull this end up, that end comes down, and vice versa. Board's rocking in there. This or this isn't straight. Turn it over, track the other way. And that's pretty darn good. I want it right up in there. Pays to check. So all the trim boards are in place in this wall. I wish I didn't have this scaffolding here so I could step back and show it to you. But I've got a ceiling fan and 2 lights to put in before I take the scaffold down. It's too darn much trouble for me to put up and down to just take it up and down for a picture. So I'm going to leave it up. Unfortunately, I can't show off my wall very well, but it starts out with tongue and groove, goes up about 10 feet to a beam across the wall with the rusty bolts. And above that is a shiplap that runs right into the tongue and groove of the ceiling. And I ran all of that without trim. I trimmed the windows and the door, but I didn't trim where the wall meets the floor. It doesn't need any trim, or baseboard rather. I figure if it doesn't need it, why put it in there? And where the shiplap meets the tongue and groove ceiling It doesn't need any trim either. I think it looks pretty cool up there where it comes into that massive ceiling beam. So that's where I'll cut this video off. Hope you got something out of this. Take care.